Well, hi everyone. I'm Andy Asher. I'm editor at Bloomer Boomer. Now, I'm talking to a woman today with an amazing story of inspiration about the willingness to explore the road less traveled and about the pursuit of a dream. Now, while Amy Charity may have some things that make her unique to the challenge, confronting the risks, uncertainty, and unknown that all of us must face, if we choose to chase a dream, it hit her too. In a moment, we'll talk with Amy Charity, who wrote this book. It's called The Wrong Way of Comfortable. Chase your dream, discover your potential, transform your life. Now, this is part of the Plus 50 Good Life movement, a project of the bloomerboomer.com publication. We'll be back with Amy Charity right after this. Well, our guest is Amy Charity with her book, aptly titled The Wrong Side of Comfortable. Amy, I want to thank you for joining us. Give us a little bit of a background as to what you did.
Yeah, great. Okay. So my background is right after college. I was following a fairly traditional career path in that I went right into financial services and worked in that industry in sort of the corporate world for the next 14 years. And that was until my mid-30s. And at the age of 34, I discovered bike racing. I competed in my first bike race and everything started from there. I absolutely loved it and spent the rest of that summer doing bike races on the side, kept my regular full-time job and kind of continued to pursue that path. Fast forward 3 years, and at the age of 37, I had left my corporate job and was a professional cyclist and racing for the U.S. national team at the age of 37. I think even my colleagues, my bosses, and the people that I worked with, some were incredibly encouraging, and others thought, "Wow, that's a pretty bold move to make this serious transition." And I actually think it's healthy to have both perspectives. I think the kind of naysayers are the ones who at least I can make sure that I'm thinking it through and make sure that I'm not being delusional about what it is that I'm going to do, and that I've thought through kind of the pros and cons of taking a major risk. And so I appreciated that side of things, and then certainly relied on a network of supporters who told me to keep going and encouraged me and supported me along the way. So I think a sort of a healthy balance of people who ask you challenging questions and those that are unconditionally behind you, I think it's great to have both sides of it.
So, how much doubt in your mind was there before you made this jump?
I think part of it was incremental. So, and what I mean by that, it wasn't just I did my first bike race and said, I'm out of here, I've got to go and be a pro cyclist. I started to take those very small steps that kind of led to the next thing. And some of those small steps were just looking the part of a cyclist, hiring a coach, getting the right equipment, such as a power meter so I could measure my progress. There were those small things, and I think that's applicable to anything that you're trying to do, whether you want to go get your MBA at a later age or learn a language. It's taking those first steps, evaluating where you are, and then saying, wow, okay, what would the next goal be? So, at one point, my ultimate goal was to win the state championships. And then after that, it was like, oh, I want to get on a professional team. And then I wanted to race in the world championship. So those steps happened kind of one by one and led to that bigger picture.
Well, how big were your goals at the time of even considering this? Were your goals just to simply race, or was it to win a championship, or where were they? How high were your aspirations?
Well, I think we all like to dream big. When I won my first bike race, the word Olympics was in the back of my head, of course. So I think that it's okay to have those sort of really, really far-reaching goals. I was on kind of the long list for the Olympics. I did not race in it, but I think that to have a really big picture dream is so healthy, because it helps you make decisions. It helps you think, what would be the best decision here? Should I go train? Should I do this? And if you have that big picture in mind, it makes kind of your trade-offs okay. It makes them more palatable when you have kind of that end image, end goal in mind. So while I didn't compete in the Olympics, I was certainly happy to finish racing in the World Championships. Is a highly esteemed race in bike racing. So that was making it to a level I never thought possible.
Now, did you tell people that you had goals or dreams of making it to the Olympics, or would you be embarrassed to tell people that?
You know, I'm a big advocate of putting it out there, what you ultimately want to do. And I think that there's a little bit of that just positive mindset of, the more it's out there, the more people think, oh, well, how can I help her make that happen? And you're committing to yourself when it's out there. So I definitely had that on my goals that I would send to my coach was, this is the ultimate. We had very realistic things as well, which was power goals and doing top 10 in a national level race. So there were the more immediate ones, and then that big picture one. I've always been a fan of putting it out there.
I'm a very positive person too, but we all have to realize that in every challenge, in the back of our mind, there's always the fear of failure. So I think it's safe to say that you thought about that. How did you deal with it?
Yeah. So I think the fear of failure is, I think it prevents us from doing a lot of things. I think it's living up to our own expectations or somebody else's expectations, or not coming off as well as we had hoped. And that's sort of the whole thinking behind what I call the wrong side of comfortable, is that anything worthwhile requires you to get outside of your comfort zone. And I think the reason people stay in their comfort zone is exactly what you're alluding to, and that's the fear of failure. So if you can have that in the back of your mind and think, well, I'm starting, at least I'm trying, at least I'm putting it out there, then you're at least taking you at least have if you don't put it out there, if you don't try, your comfort zone, and you're not going to make the gains.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you have a plan B in mind if none of this worked out?
Yeah, definitely. So I think something that was helpful along the way was really staying in contact with my colleagues from the job that I left, and maintaining those good relationships. When I left that job, I did coach on the side. I did everything I could. The cycling world, for those of you that don't know, is not very lucrative. So it was a matter of scraping by in every sense of the imagination. Our cycling salaries are pretty low. So it was just doing what I could to kind of continue to bring in enough money to support myself, and that doing coaching, and I had some part-time location neutral work. So I think keeping that going, just a little bit of a life outside of the cycling scene, to first of all just keep myself afloat financially, but also to remember what it was like to sit at a computer and do some work and engage my brain and things outside of bike racing, was a bit of a backup plan.
Do you feel maybe you had, or what were your unfair advantages?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I think it's such a critical piece of all of this. And the angle I come from is that as you're suggesting, we all have them, and you just have to find yours. I think mine was endurance. So by my mid 30s, I think that there's this tendency for women specifically, but for people to, if they have been athletic their whole lives, to be able to have that sort of long kind of diesel engine. And that was my skill set in bike races. I knew when they got hard, I knew when they were longer, that I would be there for the end. And I think there were a lot of things I didn't have. A lot just risk taking and a really aggressive sprint. Just being incredibly risky on wet winding descents. That was never my thing. But I think if I focusing on kind of that endurance side of things and the knowing that I would be there, the more selective a race was absolutely critical. I think every step along the way you think through, what are my trade-offs? Is it worth it? And am I still passionate about that end goal? And so mine started pretty small. In bike racing, you don't do much of anything else. The old saying goes, if you can lay down, basically you lay down. Like my coach wanted me to pedal or be resting at all points. And so some very basic things that were a part of my life, like swimming, hiking, walking the dogs, I had to stop all of that. Basically, I literally needed to either ride my bike or rest. So that kind of physical activity and exercise and social outlet with my friends and doing those things started to come to an end. Things like happy hour, movies, dinners, those were done because it made sense for me to stay at home, eat healthy, have my feet up. And then I was married, and still I am, but I needed to sort of move away from the mountain town where I live, and I rented a room in Tucson, which is a hotbed for. I left my husband and my dog for months at a time to go train. So as you can see, these started very small things like happy hour you can live without, but then the trade-offs got bigger and bigger and bigger. So everything from the time, how I spent my time with my friends and my family changed dramatically. And I basically lived out of a suitcase for 3 years. So again, you really have to want something to make those major trade-offs.
What kind of takeaways might you be able to share that you learned?
Yeah, so I think one is that it's never too late. It literally, whatever it is that you're interested in, it doesn't have to even be a sport. It can be gardening, cooking, languages, studying something different. Whatever it is, just start somewhere and take those small steps and see where it takes you. So I think that it doesn't matter if you're in your 60s, 70s or older. I think if you have an interest and a desire, give it a shot and see if you can discover that passion. I think there are trade-offs along the way, but if you are interested in something, you can kind of continue down that path and keep it going. And then I'd say surround yourself by those people who are supportive in what it is you're interested in doing. Find that group, find that network, find people who are doing those things that you love. And I think you can surprise yourself. That's the sweet spot, is discovering something that you never thought was possible and doing it.
Something you talk about is doing things incrementally, and maybe that works well in that scenario as well.
It sure does. Yeah, those small steps, I always say it's like buying the right pair of socks was my first step in pro racing. I noticed that people wore taller socks, and I was like, oh, I've got to look like a cyclist. So do those little things and then see where you go, and then do the next little thing.
Okay, so are you back to what you were doing, whatever it was, 6 or 7 years ago, or what?
No, I'm not. I work for a cycling nonprofit right now, and I have a couple other big backcountry adventures on the list. So I'm still pushing limits, just with something other than the bike.
So something tells me maybe you're out of the corporate world and on another path.
Well, it's possible. I'm finding a lot of fulfillment in this world right now. So I haven't ruled anything out, but I'm certainly enjoying it right now.
Well, fantastic. Anything else that you'd want to share?
No, just keep challenging your comfort zone. I think that's a great message. Just give something a try and see if you can surprise yourself.
Well, thanks so much. This is her book. Amy Charity with The Wrong Side of Comfortable. Amy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
We'll be right back. Well, I hope you liked the show, and I hope you learned a thing or two. The full show will be available on YouTube and at Bloomer Boomer. The audio version will be available on Apple Podcasts, and we have other shows coming up with some amazing guests. Please like us on Facebook and visit us at bloomerboomer.com. Until next time, so long.